My name is Carl Johnson, 58 years old, and I never thought I would feel like an outsider at my own daughter Emily's wedding. After raising her alone since she was 3, I arrived at this luxury resort only to discover my place card labeled charity case by obligation. The laughter from her wealthy in-laws cut deeper than any knife. I almost walked away to spare her the scene. But what Emily did next changed everything. While I tell you how my daughter stood up for me that day, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. If you believe family is about love, not money or blood. I've always been an ordinary man with a simple life. Before Emily, I worked as a structural engineer for a mid-sized construction company in Minneapolis. The pay was decent, not extraordinary, but enough to live comfortably. I owned a small 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. That was important to me, even before I knew I'd be raising a child alone. I met Patricia when we were both 29. She walked into a coffee shop where I was reviewing blueprints, spilled her latte on my papers, and somehow that led to dinner. Patricia was beautiful, vibrant, and unpredictable. She worked as a flight attendant, loved traveling, and had a restlessness I found exciting at first. We married 6 months later, and Emily was born a year after that. The first signs of trouble appeared when Patricia had to return to work after maternity leave. She became increasingly distant, irritable, and would take extra shifts to stay away from home. I thought it was just postpartum depression, so I picked up more responsibilities with Emily, hoping to give Patricia time to heal. Then one Tuesday morning, when Emily was 3, I woke up to find Patricia gone. There was just a brief note on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore. I'm not meant to be a mother or wife. Don't try to find me." She took her passport, some clothes, and left everything else behind, including our daughter. For weeks, I was in shock. I kept expecting Patricia to walk through the door, saying she just needed a break. I hired a private investigator, who eventually found that she had flown to Europe with a pilot she'd been seeing. She made it clear through a brief, cold email that she had no interest in Emily or me. The divorce papers were signed remotely, and just like that, I became a single father. Those first few months were the hardest. I would find Emily waiting by the window, asking when Mommy was coming home. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that her mother chose to leave? I settled on telling her that Mommy had to go away for a very long time, but that I would always be there. Eventually, she stopped asking. I had to completely rearrange my life around Emily. My boss was understanding enough to give me more flexible hours, but I had to turn down a promotion that would have required travel. Money became tighter, but we managed. I learned to cook properly, figured out how to braid hair by watching YouTube tutorials, and even sewed a princess costume for her school play when I couldn't afford to buy one. Birthday parties were particularly challenging. I would watch other mothers, helping their daughters, all of them giving me that same pitying look. The poor single dad, I could almost hear them thinking. But I refused to let Emily feel like she was missing out on anything. I organized themed parties, baked cakes that looked nothing like the Pinterest photos, but made Emily smile and became both mum and dad at every school event. As Emily grew, so did our bond. She was exceptionally bright with an innate curiosity about how things worked. By age 10, she was reading medical books because a classmate had broken an arm, and she wanted to understand the healing process. I encouraged her interest in science, scraping together money for chemistry sets and microscopes from garage sales. When Emily was 15, she announced she wanted to become a pediatrician. "I want to help kids, Dad," she said, with such conviction that I knew she would make it happen. I started working overtime and weekend shifts, putting every extra dollar into her college fund. There were nights I would come home so tired I could barely stay awake through dinner, but seeing her excitement when she talked about medical school made it worthwhile. By her senior year of high school, Emily had earned a partial scholarship to a prestigious university. It wasn't enough to cover everything, so I took out a second mortgage on our house. "Dad, we could find a cheaper school," she protested when she found out. "No way," I told her. "You've earned this opportunity. We'll make it work." And we did make it work. Emily graduated with honors, then got accepted to medical school. Those were lean years for both of us. She lived on campus and worked part-time as a research assistant, while I picked up consulting jobs on the side to help with her expenses. There were times when I ate ramen for a week straight, so I could send her money for books. When Emily started her residency at Harrington Memorial, a prestigious private hospital, I couldn't have been prouder. That was where she met Andrew Harrington. Yes, from that Harrington family. His father Richard was the chairman of Harrington Health Systems, a network of private hospitals across the country. Andrew was completing his MBA while working in the hospital administration. Emily mentioned him casually at first. "There's this guy at work who keeps bringing coffee to the pediatrics ward." Then it was Andrew invited me to dinner to discuss a children's wellness program. Before long, they were dating seriously. The first time I met Andrew, I liked him immediately. He had none of the arrogance you might expect from someone born into wealth. He was polite, intelligent, and looked at Emily like she hung the moon. Most importantly, he valued her mind and ambitions. When they had been dating for a year, Emily brought Andrew to our house for Thanksgiving. As we ate our modest meal at my worn kitchen table, Andrew said something I'll never forget. "Sir, I want you to know how much I admire what you've done for Emily. She tells me stories about all your sacrifices. You raised an incredible doctor and an even more incredible person." I nearly choked up right there over the pumpkin pie. For years I'd wondered if I was enough for Emily, if she'd missed out by not having a mother or a fancier life. Hearing Andrew's words felt like validation of every late night, every extra shift, every moment of doubt. A month later, Andrew proposed. Emily called me ecstatic, and I felt pure joy for her. It wasn't until she mentioned meeting his family that the first twinge of worry crept in. "They're excited to meet you too, Dad," she assured me. Somehow I doubted that was true. My first encounter with the Harringtons came in the form of a dinner at their estate in the wealthiest suburb of the city. I wore my best suit, which wasn't saying much. It was the same one I'd worn to Emily's college graduation, slightly dated, but well-maintained. I brought a bottle of wine that had seemed expensive at my neighborhood store, but probably cost less than the Harringtons' dinner napkins. Victoria Harrington greeted me with an air kiss and a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "So you're Emily's father," she said, giving me a quick once-over. "We've heard so much about you." The way she emphasized so much made it clear they had discussed me extensively, and not in flattering terms. Richard Harrington shook my hand with the firm grip of someone accustomed to asserting dominance in every interaction. "Construction, is it?" he asked, though Emily had surely told them what I did. "Interesting choice. Always admired men who work with their hands." The condescension was thinly veiled. James Andrew's older brother didn't bother with pretense. When Emily mentioned I'd helped her with a science project that sparked her interest in medicine, he laughed. "Guess you can't judge scientific aptitude by socio-economic background," he said, raising his crystal glass in a mock toast. Emily tensed beside me, but before she could speak, Andrew cut in. "Actually, Carl has an engineering degree from the University of Minnesota. He's designed structural systems for several major buildings downtown. I appreciated his defense, but it only highlighted the class divide they were determined to emphasize. Throughout dinner, Victoria peppered the conversation with references to their family's accomplishments and connections. Of course, when Andrew was at Dartmouth, or James's wedding in Santorini was attended by the ambassador, each anecdote seemed designed to remind us where we stood in relation to their social hierarchy. When the topic turned to wedding planning, Victoria immediately took control. "We've already spoken to our planner about dates at the Harrington Lake property," she said, not bothering to consult Emily. "Spring would be lovely, though we'll need to work around the governor's schedule since he and Richard are so close." Emily tried to interject. "Actually, Dad and I always talked about a fall wedding. The colors would be beautiful and—" "Oh, darling," Victoria interrupted with a laugh. "Fall is so common. Every secretary and sales clerk gets married in fall. A Harrington wedding will set trends, not follow them." I watched my daughter's face fall slightly before she composed herself. Andrew squeezed her hand under the table, a small gesture of solidarity that gave me hope. Perhaps he wasn't completely under his family's thumb. As the evening wore on, I made peace with being tolerated rather than welcomed. What mattered was Emily's happiness. If enduring the Harringtons' subtle jabs was the price of admission, I'd pay it gladly for her sake. Over the following months, the gap between our worlds became increasingly apparent. Victoria would call Emily with suggestions that were clearly demands. Richard would make passing comments about elevating Emily's background through proper introductions to their circle. James took every opportunity to remind me that my daughter was being rescued from her humble beginnings. Andrew, to his credit, seemed oblivious to much of this. He'd grown up in such privilege that he didn't recognize the microaggressions his family deployed. When he did notice, he would defend us, but he also didn't see how systematic their behavior was, how every interaction was designed to establish hierarchy. Emily assured me that she and Andrew had their own vision for their life together, that his family's opinions wouldn't dictate their future. I wanted to believe her, but I also began to wonder if I was holding her back. Would her life with Andrew be easier if I faded into the background? These thoughts kept me awake at night. My concerns multiplied when I suffered a minor accident at work. A scaffolding collapse left me with a broken wrist and unable to work for 6 weeks. Workers' compensation covered the basics, but the timing couldn't have been worse with wedding expenses looming. I didn't tell Emily about my financial worries, not wanting to add to her stress. As the wedding approached, the Harringtons took control of every detail. Their wedding planner presented options that started at extravagant and rose to obscene. When I quietly mentioned to Emily that I'd saved $20,000 for her wedding, an amount that had seemed substantial until now, Victoria overheard and laughed as if I'd told an amusing joke. "That's sweet," she said, patting my arm condescendingly. "But just the flowers will be twice that. Don't worry, Richard and I are happy to handle everything. It's traditional for the bride's family to pay, but in situations like these, well, we understand." Situations like these. The words hung in the air like a bad odor. Emily started to object, but I squeezed her hand. This wasn't the hill to die on. "Thank you for your generosity," I said, swallowing my pride. Later that night, Emily called upset. "Dad, I don't care about a fancy wedding. We could get married at the courthouse with just you there, and I'd be happy." "Honey, this is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. The Harringtons want to give you something special, and that's okay. I want you to have beautiful memories." What I didn't tell her was that I'd already sold my car and taken out a loan against my retirement to contribute something meaningful to the wedding. I might not be able to match the Harringtons' extravagance, but I would not appear empty-handed. The wedding invitation arrived 2 months before the date, an elaborate creation of heavy cardstock and gold foil. The venue was Lakeside Resort and Spa, an exclusive destination where rooms started at $500 per night. Emily called to assure me that my accommodation was covered. "Andrew insisted," she said. "You're the father of the bride. Everything is taken care of." I should have known then that "taken care of" would have a very different meaning to the Harringtons than it did to me. The day before the wedding, I packed my weekend bag and began the 5-hour drive to Lakeside Resort. I had offered to help with any last-minute preparations, but Victoria assured me everything was well in hand. Still, I wanted to arrive early to spend some quiet time with Emily before she became Mrs. Harrington. The resort was even more impressive than the photos. Sprawling across 30 acres of lakefront property, it featured pristine gardens, a championship golf course, and a main building that resembled a European chateau. Luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway, where uniformed valets greeted guests. When I pulled up in my 15-year-old sedan, recently purchased to replace the one I'd sold, the valet's smile faltered slightly. "Welcome to Lakeside, sir. Are you checking in for the conference?" "I'm here for the Harrington-Williams wedding," I replied. "Carl Johnson, father of the bride." His expression shifted to confusion as he consulted his tablet. "Let me check on that, sir. The wedding guests are receiving welcome packages upon arrival." After several minutes of tapping and frowning, he directed me to the main reception desk, where a similar scene played out. The receptionist couldn't find my name on the VIP guest list, only locating me after searching through a secondary roster. "Ah, here you are, Mr. Johnson. You're in the Lakeside Annex Room 118. She handed me a key card and pointed toward a separate building, visible through the windows, a considerable distance from the main resort. "I thought I was staying in the main building with the wedding party," I said, recalling Emily's assurances. The receptionist gave me a practiced smile. "The main building is fully booked with the Harrington party and their priority guests. The annex is quite comfortable, though the shuttle to the main resort runs every 30 minutes until 11 p.m. As I drove to the annex, I realized what had happened. The Harringtons had segregated me from the real guests. The annex room confirmed my suspicions. It was clean but basic, with a view of the parking lot instead of the lake. No welcome package awaited me. No schedule of events, nothing to indicate I was part of the wedding party. I called Emily, but her phone went straight to voicemail. She was probably busy with rehearsals and preparations. I didn't leave a message. What would I say? That her future in-laws had put me in the equivalent of the service quarters. She had enough stress without adding to it. At 7, I took the shuttle back to the main building for the rehearsal dinner. The ballroom was transformed into an elegant space with crystal chandeliers, elaborate floral arrangements, and tables adorned with fine china and silver. A string quartet played softly in the corner. I stood at the entrance, uncertain where to go. No one greeted me or directed me to a table. Guests in expensive attire mingled, champagne flutes in hand, all seeming to know each other. I spotted Richard holding court with several distinguished-looking men, while Victoria fluttered between groups of well-dressed women who air-kissed and laughed at inside jokes. A server approached with a tray. "Champagne, sir," he offered. I took a glass, grateful for something to do with my hands. "Are you with catering?" a woman in a designer dress asked, eyeing my suit. It was new, the best I could afford, but clearly not up to the standards of this crowd. "No, I'm Emily's father," I replied. "Oh," she exclaimed, surprised. "I didn't realize. That is, Victoria mentioned Emily was raised by. How nice you could make it." She quickly excused herself, leaving me standing alone again. Eventually, I found my assigned table far from the head table, where Emily and Andrew sat with his parents and brother. When Victoria noticed me, she swept over, kissed my cheek, and loudly announced, "Here's the man who raised our Emily before she found her way to us." Several nearby guests murmured and gave me sympathetic looks, typically reserved for charity cases. Throughout dinner, I attempted conversation with my table mates, who included distant relatives and business associates of the Harringtons. They asked polite questions about my work, nodding with manufactured interest at my answers, before turning the conversation back to topics that excluded me. Private schools I'd never heard of, vacation properties in places I'd never visit, mutual acquaintances in circles I'd never enter. Emily caught my eye across the room and mouthed, "You okay?" I gave her a thumbs up and my most convincing smile. This was her night. I wouldn't ruin it by appearing uncomfortable or offended. After dinner, I hoped to have a few minutes with Emily, but she was surrounded by guests congratulating her and taking photos. Andrew came over briefly, shaking my hand warmly. "So glad you're here, Carl. Sorry for the chaos. Tomorrow will be better, I promise." I nodded, wanting to believe him. As the evening wound down, I discovered I wasn't included in the schedule for the wedding rehearsal itself. When I inquired with the wedding planner, she checked her clipboard and frowned. "You're not listed in the processional, Mr. Johnson. Perhaps there's been a change of plans you should check with the bride." Confused and increasingly concerned, I made my way toward the garden where the rehearsal was starting. As I approached, I overheard Victoria speaking to Richard and James near a flowering archway. "We've arranged for Emily to walk alone. It's more elegant that way," Victoria was saying. "Carl's presence would only complicate things visually. The photographer agrees. Besides," James added with a snicker, "can you imagine him in the family photos? Might as well include the gardener." Now," Richard said, though his tone held more amusement than reproach. "Carl serves his purpose. We should be grateful to him for getting Emily to a point where Andrew could find her. Every charity project needs someone to take credit for the early groundwork." I froze, their words hitting like physical blows. For 24 years, I had poured everything into raising Emily, loving her, supporting her dreams. And to them, I was just a preliminary caretaker, someone whose role was fulfilled once they entered the picture. I backed away silently, returning to the now empty ballroom. I needed to compose myself before seeing Emily. She didn't need to know what I'd overheard, not when she was about to marry into this family. I had to find a way to make peace with my new role in her life, diminished as it might be. When I finally found Emily, she was running between meetings with the florist, photographer, and wedding planner. "Dad, I've barely seen you," she said, hugging me quickly. "Everything's crazy right now. Are you comfortable? Is your room okay?" I forced a smile. "Everything's fine. Don't worry about me. Focus on your big day." She looked at me skeptically. "You sure you seem off?" "Just tired from the drive. Go finish your preparations. We'll talk tomorrow." Emily hesitated, then was called away by the coordinator. "Love you, Dad," she said over her shoulder as she hurried off. "Love you too, sweetie," I replied, watching her disappear into the whirlwind of wedding activity. Back in my annex room, I lay awake, replaying the Harringtons' words. I thought of all the nights I'd sat by Emily's bed, when she had fevers, all the school lunches I'd packed, all the scraped knees I'd bandaged. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike, helping with science fair projects, and sitting up with her when her first boyfriend broke her heart. None of that mattered to the Harringtons. To them, I was an embarrassing footnote in Emily's story, a rough draft before they provided the polished final version. Morning came after a restless night. Today my daughter would be married. Whatever the Harringtons thought of me, I would hold my head high and focus on Emily's happiness. That had always been enough before. It would have to be enough now. The morning of Emily's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect September day, with blue skies and a gentle breeze off the lake. I woke early, having barely slept, and carefully prepared for the day. I shaved twice to ensure a perfectly smooth face, polished my new dress shoes until they gleamed, and spent extra time making sure my tie was straight. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock, with the reception to follow immediately. I hadn't received any information about the morning timeline, so I called the front desk, who directed me to the wedding coordinator. She sounded surprised to hear from me. "Mr. Johnson, the wedding party is preparing in the north wing. Did you need something specific? I was just wondering when I should be ready, if there are any pre-ceremony photographs or meetings I should attend as father of the bride." There was an awkward pause. "Let me check my notes. You're not scheduled for pre-ceremony photos. Those are just immediate family." I bit back the obvious response that I was, in fact, Emily's immediate family. "What time should I arrive at the ceremony, then?" "Guests are being seated from 1:30. You should arrive by 1:15 to be escorted to your seat." Guests, not wedding party, just another attendee. I thanked her and hung up, fighting the heaviness settling in my chest. I decided to use the extra time to wrap Emily's wedding gift. I'd found an antique silver locket and had it engraved with her initials on one side and the date on the other. Inside, I placed a tiny photo of the two of us from her medical school graduation. It had cost more than I could afford, but some things were worth the sacrifice. Along with the locket, I had created an album chronicling our life together, from her earliest days to recent times. Each page contained photos, ticket stubs, report cards, drawings, and small mementos with handwritten notes explaining the significance of each item. It had taken months to assemble, digging through boxes of memories stored in my attic. As I finished wrapping these gifts, my phone rang. It was Emily. "Dad, where are you?" "I've been trying to find you all morning. I'm in my room at the annex. No one told me when or where to meet you." There was a pause, then what sounded like Emily covering the phone and speaking sharply to someone else. "I'm coming to get you," she finally said. "Stay there." 15 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Emily stood there in a white silk robe, her hair partially done, looking both beautiful and furious. "Why are you stuck out here? Why weren't you at the breakfast? Why didn't anyone bring you to the family suite?" The questions tumbled out as she entered the room. "It's okay, honey. There must have been some miscommunication." "It's not okay, Dad. Victoria told me you declined the family breakfast because you wanted to rest. She said you preferred staying in the annex because it was quieter." Emily's eyes flashed with anger. I should have known better. I took her hands in mine, not wanting her day ruined by family politics. "Let's not focus on that now. This is your wedding day. You look beautiful already, and I'm so proud of you." Emily's expression softened. "Oh, Dad." She hugged me tightly. "None of this would be possible without you. You know that, right? Everything I am, everything I've achieved, it's because of you." I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I just gave you roots. You grew your own wings." She laughed, a sound that had brought me joy since she was a baby. Always with the cheesy metaphors. Then she spotted the wrapped gifts on the bed. "What are those?" "Just a little something for the bride. Open them later when you have time." Emily checked her watch. "I should get back. They're finishing my hair in 20 minutes. She hesitated, then asked, "Are you walking me down the aisle, right?" Victoria mentioned some nonsense about me walking alone for aesthetics. So it hadn't been settled. "What do you want, Emily?" "I want my dad to give me away, like we've talked about since I was little." I nodded, relief washing over me. Then that's what will happen. She kissed my cheek. Come to the main building at noon. Andrew's sister Megan will find you and bring you to where you need to be. She started to leave, then turned back. And Dad, wear the blue tie instead. It brings out your eyes. After Emily left, I changed ties, as instructed, gathered my gifts, and headed to the main building. Megan Harrington, who I'd only met briefly the previous night, found me in the lobby. Unlike her parents and brother James, she seemed genuinely friendly. Emily asked me to rescue you, she said with a conspiratorial smile. My family can be a bit overwhelming, but Andrew loves Emily, and he thinks the world of you. She led me to a suite where I could wait until the ceremony. It wasn't with the main wedding party, but at least it was in the same building. As the hours passed, various wedding staff came by with instructions, and eventually a boutonniere was delivered. No one mentioned the processional or my role in it until the wedding planner appeared, looking flustered. Miss Johnson. Emily is insisting you walk her down the aisle, but it's not in the program. We'll need to make adjustments. My daughter asked me to give her away, I said firmly. That's what I'm going to do. The wedding planner nodded, making notes on her tablet. Very well. Please be ready in 10 minutes. I'll come get you. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotions. When I saw Emily in her wedding dress, a vision of elegance and grace, tears filled my eyes. This beautiful, brilliant woman was my little girl, the center of my world for 24 years. As I walked her down the aisle past rows of strangers in expensive attire, I felt both immensely proud and acutely aware of the Harringtons watching with tight smiles. When the minister asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" I responded clearly, "I do," squeezing Emily's hand before placing it in Andrew's. As I took my seat in the front row, I noticed it was separate from where Victoria and Richard sat on the groom's side. A small but deliberate distinction. The ceremony was lovely, with personal vows that made me cry again. Emily and Andrew looked so happy, so in love, that I could almost forget the tension underlying the event. When they were pronounced husband and wife, I cheered as loudly as anyone. After the ceremony, guests moved to a grand ballroom for the reception. Round tables with elaborate centerpieces filled the space, each with a small card indicating table numbers and assigned seating. I searched for my name, expecting to be at the family table near the front. I wasn't there. I checked table after table, moving further from the head table, until finally at the very back of the room, almost by the kitchen doors, I found my place card. It didn't say Carl Johnson, father of the bride. It said charity case, by obligation. I stared at it, certain I was mistaken. I picked it up, turned it over, but the words remained unchanged. A burst of laughter drew my attention to James Harrington, and several friends at the adjacent table watching me with obvious amusement. "Like your seating assignment, Carl," James called out. "Just wanted to make sure everyone knows exactly what role you play in this family merger." My hands trembled as I set the card down. 24 years of being everything to Emily, reduced to a cruel joke for the amusement of spoiled, entitled strangers. I felt a combination of humiliation and rage unlike anything I'd experienced before. I turned to leave, unable to bear the thought of Emily seeing this, of her perfect day, being ruined by the ugliness of her new family's behavior. But as I headed for the exit, I heard her voice. "Dad, what's wrong? Where are you going?" Emily stood there in her wedding dress, concern etched across her features. Andrew beside her, looking confused. I tried to smile to brush it off, but she knew me too well. "Nothing, honey. Just needed some air. You should get back to your guests." She frowned, coming closer. Something happened. Tell me. I hesitated, but she was already looking past me to the table where my place card sat. Before I could stop her, she walked over and read it. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "Who did this?" she demanded, her voice carrying across the now quieting room. "Who thought this was acceptable?" James stepped forward, still smirking. "Come on, Emily. It was just a little joke. Lighten up." Andrew moved beside his new wife, picking up the card. As he read it, his expression hardened. "What the hell, James? And you wonder why I keep my distance from the family these days?" Victoria and Richard approached, sensing the disturbance. "What's happening?" "The photographer is waiting for family photos," Victoria said. Emily thrust the place card at her mother-in-law. "Did you know about this? Did you approve of insulting my father at my wedding?" Victoria barely glanced at the card. "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Perhaps a staff error." "Staff error." Emily's voice rose. "So the staff randomly decided to call my father a charity case. Do you think I'm stupid?" Richard stepped in, his voice low and controlled. "Emily, scenes like this are unnecessary. Whatever juvenile prank occurred, we can address it privately." James laughed. "Come on. We all know Carl isn't exactly Harrington material. He should be grateful we even included him." The room had gone silent, guests watching the drama unfold with uncomfortable fascination. I wanted to disappear, to spare Emily this humiliation on what should have been the happiest day of her life. "Emily, please," I started. "It's not worth—" "It is worth it, Dad," she interrupted, her eyes blazing. "These people think they can treat you like this. After everything you've done for me." She turned to the Harringtons. "My father worked 60-hour weeks to put me through college. He sold his car to help pay for medical school applications. He taught me everything about integrity and hard work and unconditional love." Andrew put his arm around Emily, facing his family. "This is disgusting. I knew you could be elitist, but this crosses every line." Victoria attempted damage control, aware of the watching crowd. "Andrew, darling, your brother's sense of humor is inappropriate sometimes, but surely we can move past this little hiccup." "Hiccup?" Emily was shaking now. "You've been treating my father like an inconvenience since the moment you met him. You put him in the annex, while everyone else stays in the main building. You tried to prevent him from walking me down the aisle. And now this." She turned to me, then to Andrew, and made a decision that left me breathless. "Dad, we're leaving now." Andrew didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. This isn't what our marriage is going to be built on." Victoria gasped. "Andrew, you can't leave your own wedding reception. We have 200 guests. The governor is here. The band hasn't even started." "Watch me," Andrew replied, taking Emily's hand. He addressed the shocked guests. "I apologize, everyone, but due to circumstances beyond our control, the reception is cancelled." Richard stepped forward, his face darkening. "Son, you're making a scene, and a terrible mistake. Think about what you're doing to your future." "I am thinking about my future," Andrew replied. "And it's with Emily, and the values she and her father represent, not whatever this is." He gestured around the opulent room. "Emily, Carl, shall we go?" I couldn't believe what was happening. "Kids, wait. Think about this. It's your wedding day." Emily took my hand. "It is, and I'm choosing to spend it with the people who truly love and respect me. That's you and Andrew, not them." She looked at the Harringtons with disappointment rather than anger. "I thought you might eventually see what an amazing man my father is. I was wrong." With that, Emily gathered her dress. Andrew offered his arm to both of us, and we walked out of the ballroom together, leaving stunned silence in our wake. We drove away from Lakeside Resort in my sedan, an unlikely escape vehicle for a bride in a designer gown and groom in a tailored tuxedo. Emily sat in the back, her voluminous dress taking up most of the space, while Andrew navigated from the passenger seat. The absurdity of our situation hit me as we passed through the ornate gates of the property. "I can't believe we just did that," I said, glancing at them in the rearview mirror. Emily's laugh was half joy, half disbelief. "I can't either. Did you see Victoria's face? I thought she might actually faint." "My mother doesn't faint," Andrew said dryly. "She calculates. Right now, she's figuring out how to spin this to the country club set." "Kids," I began cautiously. "I appreciate what you did back there, standing up for me. But it was your wedding. Are you sure?" "Dad, stop," Emily interrupted. "What they did was unforgivable. We couldn't stay." "But all those guests, the expense?" Andrew shook his head. "Carl, that wedding wasn't for us. It was for my parents' social standing. A business function disguised as a celebration." He loosened his bow tie with a sigh of relief. "Honestly, this feels more authentic than anything that would have happened in that ballroom." We drove in silence for a while, the enormity of their decision settling over us. I worried about the consequences for them both. Would Andrew's family cut him off? Would this affect Emily's career at the hospital his family owned? "Where are we going anyway?" Emily finally asked. I realized I'd been driving aimlessly, putting distance between us and the resort. "My place, I guess. Unless you have somewhere else in mind." "Your place sounds perfect," Andrew said, "if that's okay with you." And so 3 hours later, we found ourselves in my modest living room. Emily and Andrew still in their wedding attire, eating delivery pizza straight from the box. I'd changed into jeans and a flannel shirt, relieved to be out of the suit that had felt like a costume all day. "Best wedding meal ever," Emily declared, taking another slice of pepperoni. Andrew raised his beer bottle in agreement. "To Carl Johnson, who raised the most incredible woman I've ever known, and who taught her to recognize when something isn't right." I clinked my bottle against his. "To you too, who had the courage to walk out of a multi-million-dollar wedding on principle." Emily grew serious. "I should have seen it coming. They've been undermining you since day one, Dad. I just didn't want to believe people could be that deliberately cruel." "They've always been like this," Andrew admitted. "Status-obsessed, judgmental. I thought I could shield you from it, that we could create our own life separate from their influence." He ran a hand through his hair. "I should have been more direct about challenging them earlier." "What happens now?" I asked, voicing the question that had been nagging at me. "With your jobs, your future, the Harringtons own the hospital where you both work." Emily and Andrew exchanged glances. "We've actually been talking about this for a while," Emily said, "even before today." Andrew nodded. "My family's approach to healthcare is problematic. It's all about profit margins and exclusive care for the wealthy. Emily and I want something different. We've been developing a plan to open a pediatric clinic, focusing on underserved communities." Emily explained, excitement creeping into her voice despite the day's events. "Andrew has the business expertise, I have the medical training. We want to create a model that provides top-quality care, regardless of ability to pay." "That sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely impressed. "But starting something like that takes substantial capital." Andrew smiled. "That's the thing. I've been quietly setting aside money since I started working. My trust fund vested when I turned 30 last year. It's not Harrington fortune level, but it's enough to launch a modest clinic and sustain it until we can secure grants and establish partnerships. We were going to tell you after the honeymoon, Emily added. Ask for your input on locations, maybe even see if you'd be interested in helping with the building renovation. I was touched by their inclusion of me in their plans, especially after feeling so marginalized by the Harringtons. I'd be honored to help, but are you sure your family won't try to block this? I asked Andrew. His expression hardened. They might try. My father has significant influence in the healthcare industry, but he doesn't control everything, and he certainly doesn't control me anymore. As if on cue, Andrew's phone began ringing. He checked the screen. Speaking of, that's my father. It's the 5th call in the last hour. Are you going to answer? Emily asked. Andrew hesitated. Not tonight. Tonight is for us. They can wait until tomorrow. He silenced the phone and set it aside. Emily's phone lit up next. Victoria now, she noted. They're tag-teaming us. They're probably worried about the social fallout, Andrew said. All those influential guests witnessing their carefully orchestrated event implode. Emily silenced her phone too, then turned to me. Dad, I'm so sorry about what they did to you. That place card, it was cruel and deliberate. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Honey, I've dealt with worse in life than some rich folks looking down their noses at me. What matters is that you're happy. I am happy, she said firmly. I married the man I love, and I stood up for the most important person in my life. She moved to sit beside me on the couch, leaning her head on my shoulder like she used to do as a child. You know what's funny? In trying to humiliate you, they revealed everything about themselves and nothing about you. Andrew joined us, sitting on the arm of the couch. Carl, I want you to know that I don't share my family's values. I fell in love with Emily because of who she is, and so much of that comes from how you raised her. I felt a lump forming in my throat. You're a good man, Andrew. I knew that the first time we met. Emily chose well. We stayed up late into the night, talking about their plans for the clinic, reminiscing about Emily's childhood, and even laughing about the absurdity of our wedding escape. By the time we all went to bed, Emily and Andrew taking her old room and me on the couch, the sting of the Harringtons' behavior had begun to fade. As I drifted off to sleep, I reflected on how differently the day had turned out from what any of us had expected. Instead of losing my daughter to a world that had no place for me, I'd gained a son who respected what Emily and I had built together. It wasn't the wedding day I'd imagined for my little girl, but somehow it felt right. None of us could have predicted what would happen next. Morning arrived with an incessant pounding on my front door. I stumbled from the couch disoriented to find James Harrington on my doorstep, looking disheveled and panicked, a far cry from his usual polished arrogance. "Where's Andrew?" he demanded, trying to push past me. I blocked his entrance. "It's 7 in the morning. What are you doing here?" "This isn't a social call," he snapped. "I need to speak with my brother immediately. It's an emergency." His tone woke Emily and Andrew, who appeared in the hallway. Emily in borrowed pajamas, and Andrew in his undershirt and suit pants from yesterday. "James." Andrew moved beside me at the door. "What's happening?" James glanced nervously at the street, then lowered his voice. "Can I come in?" "This isn't something to discuss on a doorstep." I reluctantly stepped aside, allowing him into my living room. James remained standing, too agitated to sit, looking completely out of place among my modest furniture. "The FBI raided the corporate offices this morning," he blurted out. "They're at the house too, and the lake property. They've frozen all the company accounts. Dad's been taken in for questioning." Andrew went still. "What are the charges?" "Everything." James ran a hand through his hair. Medicare fraud insurance, fraud tax evasion, bribing government officials. They're saying it goes back years. He looked at his brother with something like desperation. You need to come back with me now. We need to present a united family front. Andrew didn't move. How long have you known about this, James? His brother avoided his gaze. Known about what? Don't insult my intelligence. The fraud. How long have you and Dad been cooking the books? James's silence was answer enough. Emily moved closer to Andrew, taking his hand. I suspected, Andrew said quietly. The profit margins were too perfect, the growth too consistent even during economic downturns. I asked questions and was always shut out of the financial meetings. He shook his head. I hoped I was wrong. Look, James lowered his voice. Whatever you suspected, whatever you think you know, we need to stick together now. The lawyers say family unity is essential. We can figure out a narrative that keeps you clean. Andrew stared at his brother. Clean. I've been working for the company for 8 years. I've signed quarterly reports, attended board meetings. If I claim ignorance now, who's going to believe me? James made a dismissive gesture. You've never been involved in the financial side. Everyone knows Dad keeps that close to the vest. Is Mom implicated? Andrew asked. James hesitated. Not directly, but they're looking at her charity foundation. There may be some irregularities with how funds were allocated. Emily, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. So the wedding was a last hurrah, James admitted. Dad knew the investigation was closing in. The wedding was a show of strength, a demonstration that nothing was wrong. Having the governor and those judges there was strategic. I watched Andrew's face as the realization dawned. You used our wedding as a smokescreen for criminal activity. His voice was dangerously quiet. All those guests weren't there to celebrate our marriage. They were there so Dad could project normalcy. James didn't deny it. We needed it to be big, prestigious. That's why we took control of everything. He glanced at me, then back to Andrew. That's why we needed to manage certain elements. Elements? Emily stepped forward. You mean my father? The man you humiliated as a charity case while you were actively committing fraud. The irony would be laughable if it weren't so disgusting. James had the decency to look uncomfortable. That was regrettable. Regrettable, I echoed, finding my voice. You deliberately tried to humiliate me at my daughter's wedding, and the best you can offer is that it was regrettable. I don't have time for this, James snapped. The family is in crisis. Andrew, are you coming or not? Andrew took a deep breath. No, James, I'm not. His brother stared in disbelief. What? I'm not going to be part of a cover-up. If the company has been engaging in illegal activities, I want no part of the defense. You'd abandon your family when we need you most, after everything we've done for you. Andrew laughed bitterly. Done for me. You've controlled me, undermined me, and apparently used my wedding as a distraction technique for federal investigators. And let's not forget how you treated the father of the woman I love. James's face hardened. So that's it. You're choosing them over your own blood, over the Harrington legacy. I'm choosing integrity, Andrew replied simply. Something I've learned from Carl and Emily. You'll regret this, James warned. When everything collapses, you'll wish you'd stood with family. Emily stepped forward. He is standing with family. The family we're building together, based on honesty and respect. James looked from Andrew to Emily, to me, contempt mixing with desperation in his expression. Enjoy your moral high ground while it lasts. When the media-feeding frenzy begins, you'll be dragged down with us, whether you want it or not." With that, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The three of us stood in silence for a moment, processing the bombshell he'd delivered. "I need to call my lawyer," Andrew finally said, "and probably the FBI. I need to make it clear I had no knowledge of any illegal activities." Emily wrapped her arms around him. "We'll get through this together." I put on coffee while Andrew made his calls. The morning news confirmed everything James had said. The FBI had indeed raided Harrington Health Systems on suspicion of massive fraud. Richard and James Harrington were shown on camera being escorted into federal offices. Victoria was filmed leaving their mansion, shielding her face from reporters. By noon, Andrew had spoken with both his personal attorney and federal investigators. He agreed to go in for questioning, but insisted he had no knowledge of the company's financial crimes. The investigators seemed to believe him, especially when he revealed he'd been systematically excluded from financial oversight. They asked if I'd be willing to help with the investigation, he told us after hanging up. Share what I do know about operations personnel internal systems. "What did you say?" Emily asked. I said yes. If my father and brother have been defrauding the government, patients, and shareholders, they should be held accountable. He ran a hand through his hair. "I just can't believe they used our wedding like that." The phone rang again, but this time it wasn't investigators or lawyers. It was Martin Chen, the chairman of the board for Harrington Health Systems. "Andrew, thank God you're not involved in this mess," he said, the relief evident in his voice. "The board is in emergency session. We need you here." Andrew frowned. "Martin, I'm as shocked as anyone. I've already told the FBI I'll cooperate with their investigation." Good, Martin replied. "That's exactly what we need. Transparency, cooperation, and Harrington at the helm who isn't implicated in this disaster." "At the helm? What are you talking about? The board wants to appoint you as interim CEO while this is sorted out. You're the only Harrington not tainted by the scandal, and we need continuity for the hospitals and patients. The stock is in free fall. We need to stabilize the situation immediately." Andrew looked stunned. "Martin, I don't know. We need you, Andrew. Thousands of employees, patients, and shareholders need you. Think about it. We're convening at 4 today." After hanging up, Andrew explained the situation to us. "They want me to take over at least temporarily." Emily sat beside him. "What do you want to do?" He hesitated. "Part of me wants to walk away completely, leave the Harrington name and all its baggage behind. But there are 30,000 employees whose livelihoods depend on the company surviving this. Patients who need care. If I can help prevent the whole system from collapsing while the legal process unfolds, you should do it," I said, surprising myself. "You have the chance to reshape the company, to make it what it should have been all along." Andrew looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, our clinic idea could actually work on a larger scale. If I have control even temporarily." Emily's eyes widened as she caught his meaning. "We could implement it throughout the Harrington network." "It won't be easy," Andrew cautioned. "There will be resistance, especially from the old guard, and the legal issues will be complex." "But think of the impact," Emily said, excitement building in her voice. "Access to quality care for communities that have been ignored, prevention programs, education initiatives." Andrew turned to me. "Carl, would you be willing to help your engineering background, your integrity, your perspective as someone who's navigated the healthcare system from the outside? We could use someone like you." I was taken aback. "Me, I don't know anything about running a healthcare company." "But you know about building things that last," Andrew said, "and about doing things the right way, even when it's harder." The conversation was interrupted by another phone call, this time from the board's general counsel, requesting a meeting with Andrew before the board session. The day became a whirlwind of calls, strategy discussions, and planning. By evening it was decided. Andrew would accept the interim CEO position with conditions: complete cooperation with investigators, a commitment to ethical practices, and a new initiative focusing on accessible care for underserved communities, with Emily leading the medical side of the project. And somehow, improbably, I was offered a role too, as a special advisor on community engagement and ethical infrastructure projects. "They want to announce the changes tomorrow," Andrew told us after the final call. "A press conference to reassure the public and markets that Harrington Health is under new management with a commitment to transparency and integrity." Emily squeezed my hand. From charity case to company advisor in 24 hours. Quite a turnaround. I shook my head, still processing the day's events. Life certainly takes unexpected turns. "Will you do it, Dad?" Emily asked. "Will you join us in this?" I thought about the Harringtons' treatment of me, the humiliation they had tried to inflict. But I also thought about the opportunity to help Emily and Andrew build something meaningful, something that could help thousands of people. "Yes," I said finally. "I'm in." None of us could have predicted that a cruel joke on a place card would lead to such a complete reversal of fortunes. The next morning, as we prepared for the press conference, there was one last surprise. Victoria Harrington appeared at my door alone and subdued. "May I come in?" she asked quietly, her usual imperious manner nowhere to be seen. I hesitated, then nodded, allowing her inside. She stood awkwardly in my living room, taking in the modest surroundings. "I owe you an apology, Carl," she said finally. "A profound one. My behavior, my family's behavior toward you has been inexcusable." I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I was raised to believe that worth was measured by wealth and social position," she continued. "It became my religion. When Emily entered our lives, I saw only where she came from, not who she was or who had shaped her." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "And now everything I valued is crumbling, while what you built remains strong." "What do you want, Victoria?" I asked directly. "A second chance," she replied simply. "Not to reclaim what was, but to be part of what Andrew and Emily are building. To learn what you've clearly always known about what truly matters." I studied her, searching for signs of manipulation or insincerity. Finding none, I simply said, "That will be up to them." As it turned out, Emily and Andrew were cautiously open to Victoria's desire for redemption. The road would be long, and trust would have to be earned, but they were willing to give her the opportunity. The press conference that afternoon marked the beginning of a new era for Harrington Health, with Andrew announcing bold reforms and Emily introducing their vision for community care. I stood slightly behind them, still somewhat uncomfortable in the spotlight, but proud beyond words of what they were attempting. And when a reporter asked Andrew about the abrupt cancellation of his wedding reception, he replied with remarkable candor, "Sometimes you have to walk away from what isn't right to make room for what is. The old Harrington way valued appearance over substance. The new Harrington Health will be built on integrity, accessibility, and genuine care for all people." I couldn't help but smile at that. From a cruel joke on a place card to a company revolution in less than 48 hours. Life truly does work in mysterious ways. 1 year has passed since the wedding that wasn't and the scandal that was. The transformation of Harrington Health Systems has been remarkable, though not without significant challenges. Richard and James Harrington both accepted plea deals rather than risk longer sentences at trial. Richard received 8 years in federal prison for his role in the massive fraud scheme, while James got 5 years, having cooperated more fully with investigators. The details that emerged during the legal proceedings shocked even Andrew, who discovered the depth of deception had been greater than anyone imagined. The company survived the initial crisis, though not without pain. 3 hospitals had to be sold to cover penalties and settlements. Several thousand employees were laid off in the corporate restructuring. The stock price, which plummeted initially, has slowly begun to recover as investors gain confidence in the new direction. Andrew's interim position became permanent 6 months ago, when the board unanimously voted to remove the temporary designation. Under his leadership, Harrington Health has implemented sweeping ethical reforms, including unprecedented transparency in billing practices and a commitment to serving diverse communities. Emily's Community Healthcare Initiative has become the company's most celebrated program. Starting with a pilot clinic in an underserved neighborhood, the model has now expanded to 15 locations across the region. These facilities provide quality care regardless of insurance status, with sliding-scale payment options and robust preventive services. As for me, I found my role evolving in unexpected ways. What began as a consulting position on community engagement turned into overseeing the design and construction of the new clinics. My engineering background proved valuable in creating efficient, welcoming spaces that served medical needs while respecting the neighborhoods they inhabited. Victoria Harrington's journey has perhaps been the most surprising. After the initial shock of her husband's and son's arrests, she retreated from public view for several months. When she re-emerged, it was as a volunteer at Emily's first community clinic, answering phones and filing paperwork like any other helper. At first, patients and staff were wary of her recognizing the Harrington name from news reports. But Victoria's genuine desire to make amends became apparent through her consistent work and humility. She sold the mansion and most of her jewelry, using the proceeds to establish a foundation providing educational support for children of incarcerated parents, a cause with obvious personal significance. Our relationship has evolved from antagonism to a cautious respect. I won't claim we've become close friends, but there is a certain understanding between us now. We both attend the Sunday dinners that Emily and Andrew host each week, Victoria bringing her famous lemon tarts that everyone politely praises, despite their consistently soggy bottoms. The most exciting development in our family came 3 months ago, when Emily announced she was pregnant. The joy I felt at that moment is indescribable. After spending most of my adult life as a single father, wondering if I'd done enough, the thought of becoming a grandfather fills me with a profound sense of continuity and hope. I've experienced other changes too. 6 months ago, I met Margaret, a retired elementary school teacher, who volunteers reading to children at one of the clinics. We connected over coffee after discovering a shared love of mystery novels and hiking. Our relationship has developed slowly, thoughtfully, both of us carrying the wisdom and scars of previous chapters in life. Last month, Andrew surprised me with a special announcement. The board had approved naming the flagship community health center after me. The Carl Johnson Center for Family Health now stands in the heart of the city, serving hundreds of patients daily. When they unveiled the sign, I couldn't hold back tears. "This is unnecessary," I protested. "No, Dad," Emily said, "it's absolutely necessary. Everything this place stands for, every value it represents, comes from what you taught me. Integrity, compassion, putting people above profit. These aren't just words to us, they're your legacy." As I reflect on the extraordinary journey from that wedding day to now, I'm struck by how life's most painful moments can sometimes lead to unexpected gifts. The place card that labeled me a charity case was meant to diminish me, to reduce my role in Emily's life to an obligation. Instead, it became the catalyst for a transformation none of us could have predicted. I think about the lessons in all of this. How true worth isn't found in bank accounts or social status, but in character and courage. How standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, ultimately leads to the life you're meant to live. How family isn't defined by blood or background, but by love and mutual respect. Emily and Andrew have created something remarkable from the ruins of the old Harrington Empire. Not just a more ethical company, but a model for what healthcare could be if we valued people over profit. I'm proud to have played some small part in that vision. As for Victoria, her journey reminds me that it's never too late to learn to grow to become a better version of yourself. Her relationship with Emily has healed gradually, and I suspect she'll be a loving grandmother in her own way. When I look back at the single father who struggled to braid his little girl's hair, who worked extra shifts to afford science camp, who sat up nights worrying if he was enough, I wish I could tell him, you're doing better than you know. The seeds you're planting now will bloom into something beautiful beyond your imagination. The place card that once labeled me a charity case sits framed in my office, now a reminder of how far we've come. From humiliation to vindication, from exclusion to belonging, from being tolerated to being celebrated. Not because I changed, but because circumstances revealed what was true all along. What defines us isn't the labels others try to attach to us, but how we respond to life's challenges with dignity and grace. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in relationships, in impact, in the lives we touch and improve. And real family isn't about sharing a last name, but about sharing values, supporting dreams, and standing together when it matters most. As I await the birth of my first grandchild, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for this unexpected chapter in my life. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been profoundly worthwhile. And it reminds me that sometimes what looks like an ending is really just the beginning of something better than we could have imagined. If you've enjoyed this story of unexpected redemption and family triumph, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Has there been a time in your life when what seemed like humiliation turned into victory? Have you ever had to stand up for a loved one against all odds? Your stories matter too. Please like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their true worth today. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with the most painful moments.